Welcome to Bounce Back Stronger, the podcast that explores ways to find peace and purpose no matter what happens. I'm your host, Donna Ferris, and today we have acupuncturist Dr. Claire McManus with us. A little about Claire. Dr. Claire McManus is a leader in the field of acupuncture with over 2 decades of experience. Claire's research and clinical practice have earned her international recognition, with her work featured in prominent publications like Time Magazine and the New York Times. But what's truly unique about Claire is her recent expansion into the world of acupuncture for animals, including penguins at zoos. And if you follow me on Instagram, you know that penguin videos are my happy place. So, Claire, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm delighted to get the chance to speak with you.
Thank you for having me.
So, we met at Kripalu
hmm
and we were with Eve Futuransky. She was leading the Inner Quest Intensive.
Yeah, the Inner Quest Intensive, which I decided about a week before I would sign up for.
It was a good weekend, though. It was a
It
good
was a
group.
great weekend. Yeah,
And
yeah.
during that weekend, you came and spoke in front of the group about your work as an acupuncturist, and maybe take us on how you got to this place. You started out in farming, organic
hmm
farming. So maybe talk a little bit about how you made that transition.
Sure. I started out in the 90s as an organic farmer and teacher. And I worked at a private school and several outdoor ed centers, which sort of focused on teaching kids about nature and where their food comes from. And it was all farm-based learning. And at that time, I really thought I wanted to get into women's health in some way. So I thought I would go on and become a nurse practitioner or a midwife. And while I was farming, I went for acupuncture. And this was in southern Vermont. I was working at the Putney School at the time. And I was having some problems with allergies and asthma. And the acupuncturist started talking to me, and I thought, oh, well, there'll be a point for the nose, and that'll be it. And then she started to talk to me about everything, my history, what I'm eating, and she started to explain how Chinese medicine or East Asian medicine sees the world. And I realized that they look at the body like it's a landscape. And it was how I, as a farmer, looked at the land. Is it too damp? Is it too dry? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Where is it thriving? What does it need to thrive? Does it, for humans now, I say, do you need warm food or cold food or certain elements in your food? But it just sort of blew my mind. And she also talked about the seasons in the body, that different organ systems had different seasons. So the lung was autumn, and the lung had an emotion, and it was grief. And at that time, I was like, oh, well, this all makes sense, Or, we look at this time of year. It's early April. It's the time of the liver. And the liver
Mm,
energy is wood and all of the sprouts. I mean, behind me, Donna, you can see all my plants. They're all throwing
beautiful.
out buds, and the energy moves really fast in the spring. It's like, think about a bubbling brook charging. And when the energy gets stuck, if you stop liver energy from moving, the emotion is anger. So people are sort of
Mm.
quick to anger. And I mean, I just ate this up. I sat in this treatment room, and it was like a calling. I was like, oh, this is what I want to study. Like, this is amazing. And the next year, I left the farm. I came to Boston. I did a master's at the New England School of Acupuncture, which is now part of Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. And actually, while I was there, I worked for the town of Natick, Massachusetts, also as an organic farmer, which was a great gig. I farmed all day and went to school at night. And always thought I'd go back to Vermont, always thought I'd have a farm, maybe, and have a day off farm where I did acupuncture to make a little money. And I ended up getting a research job while I was working on my master's, which led to a job when I was right out of school with Harvard Med School. And this
Wow.
was a time when acupuncture research was just beginning in the US. It had been happening in China for decades, but mainly on animals, which is interesting when people think, oh, acupuncture on animals is so far out. But a lot of the early mechanistic studies are on rats and rabbits and mice and things. So we understand from a scientific point of view how some of the points work because of animal studies. Something about the sort of history of acupuncture research in the US is that the NIH set up an agency in either 97 or 98. And at first they had the Office of Alternative Health. And then a few years later, they called it the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. And then that was in 99. In 2014, it later evolved to the National Center of Complementary Medicine and Integrative Health. And then now, now it's like the leading funding scientific agency for studies on acupuncture. And I think it's 2025 now. 25 years ago, we were trying to prove, does it work? What do the points do? And now, like, we know it works. And now we're trying to figure out what does it work best for. But getting back to my trajectory, I was doing that research, and I was also doing a little bit of acupuncture teaching. I worked with a group that taught practitioners in Uganda to treat people with HIV. Early in my practice, I worked with a lot of HIV patients. They were on medications that were hard to digest, made it hard for them to digest foods. And so a lot of people couldn't be compliant with their medications because it was so hard on their systems. So we weren't using acupuncture thinking, oh, it's going to help, it's going to cure AIDS. That was not it. It's going to harmonize your system so that you can actually digest and metabolize and tolerate the medications that are keeping your viral loads down. And that was a really fascinating journey for me to treat all these folks with HIV/AIDS. And so I went to Uganda to work with a group that trained practitioners in using acupuncture and moxibustion, which is another form of East Asian medicine where we burn an herb. It's called Artemisia vulgaris, but we warm the points with the herb. And while I was there, if you fly all the way to East Africa, you should probably go on safari.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm
Yeah,
all the
I
way
would.
over here. I went to Kenya. My cousin was living in Mombasa at the time. We took his pickup truck. We went into one of these game reserves. I saw these giraffes. The whole thing, I was just like blown away by nature. And the week I came back, I read an article in the Boston Globe about Bo, who was a giraffe at the Zoo New England. And Zoe had this wasting syndrome. And I was like, oh my God, this sounds like my HIV patients. And I totally did the thing, like the cold call. I wrote a letter to the head of the zoo. And I said, this is who I am. I work at Harvard Med School. I do research. I think I can help your giraffe. And and I didn't
I
expect to
love
hear anything
this.
from him, but it was just one of these like, why not? Like, let's just try it. And he, like a week later, I didn't get a call from him, or no, maybe he said, I'm going to pass this on to my vet. But his head vet reached out to me and she said, I have had acupuncture for my dogs. I don't know much about it. Will you come in and meet the giraffe? And so I went in. Now, like, there's a lot of logistics with treating animals, which we'll talk about later, but this was clearly going to be so dangerous. Like, just meeting this giraffe, I'm up on scaffolding. They'll put you in like a climber's harness because the head of the giraffe is like 2 feet long. He could just take his head and knock you off.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
said, this we're never going to get this guy to stand still. The digestive points are down the legs. Giraffe can kill a lion with a kick. Like, I think I'm out on this, right? And
This
also
seems
we burn.
unwise.
Yeah, this is unwise. I said, and also we burn an herb, and I'm in a hay barn here. Like, I know enough from being a farmer that like we're not lighting any matches in here. So we walk out and we're talking, and she was like, well, and I quote this all the time. She said, well, Claire, while you're here, I have this ornery geriatric warthog. Would you consider treating him? And I was like, right on. This is way more my possibility. So, and it's interesting. I mean, warthogs are in the swine family. They're pigs. They're super smart animals. If you've ever met a pig, they're like, your dog times 12. They're unbelievable. And so the warthogs were very suspect of the vet crew, whatever they came in and meant they were going to be, have some procedure they didn't want. So for weeks, I went in and just spent quality time with the warthog, not in his pen, but right next to it. And eventually I developed tools that I could treat him kind of over a low wall. And then I treated his partner. I must have treated this warthog every Thursday morning for 4 or 5 years. It was amazing.
Wow.
And the word just kind of got out. Then the aquarium called me and I treated a lot of other animals at the zoo, hippos and tapirs and ibex and a camel. I mean, it was really cool to translate this.
Amazing.
Off and on, they'll still call me. But the aquarium called me for endangered sea turtles. And
Aw.
we have a problem in eastern Massachusetts in the late fall. The water gets really cold. And there's a type of sea turtle, primarily the Kemp's ridleys. There's only about 5,000 left on the planet. And hundreds, I would say, some years hundreds, will get stuck in the inner Cape. And they're ectothermic, so they can't regulate their body temperature. the
Oh,
water temperature goes down and they end up kind of bobbing and then they'll wash on shore. And there's a whole group of volunteers who go and do walks on the beaches to patrol for stranded turtles. And then they come into a special hospital that the aquarium has off site and they warm them up and they treat them for pneumonia or for sometimes frostbite. So they'll have shoulder issues or jaw issues. And the head vet there called me and asked if I would come in and treat this Kemp's Ridley sea turtle with a jaw issue. And I was like, sure, but I am embarrassed to say it now, but I was like, ooh, turtles. Like, okay. Like, also there's not a whole lot of literature on the turtles. There was more on the mammals that I had been treating. And when I sent, I mean, these guys are great to work with collaboratively because zoo vets and aquarium vets, they work with, pediatricians with gorillas and cardiologists with gorillas and dentists for the lions. So they're used to working with human practitioners. So he sent me a whole thing of turtle anatomy, which it might blow your mind to find out that underneath their flippers, they have 5 digits, just like you and I, and they have a radius and an ulna
oh
and they
my
have,
gosh.
upper trapezius and so I think the one thing that really blew my mind, and this is sort of, I guess, as a meditator and as a person who loves nature and loves the cycle, is that the minute I put my hand on this turtle, I was like cognizant that like this is an ancient creature. It was like time travel just touching it. It was so far out, and I just fell in love. And so since
Oh,
2010, I've been on call with them for their turtles, and it's really fun. And then they started to say, okay, how about some penguins? And I've had other aquariums bring me penguins, and the African penguins, who are endangered species, they're primarily from the southwest coast of the African continent. They tend to have a lot of back problems. So I have seen many penguins over the years for back issues. And I don't know, it makes sense for me. I think the reason I was able to contact the zoo in the first place and write that one cold call letter, was that I was very comfortable with large livestock and I wasn't afraid of it. And it just opened a door that,
that's never shut.
I'm never gonna close. Yeah,
That's
never
never
gonna shut.
shut.
Yeah, yeah.
And then some of those penguins were featured in a New York Times article
Yeah, so a week
recently.
or two ago, they did a really nice article. It was in the Times, it was in the Globe. And what's happening now is that these penguins that are living under human care are living much longer than they live in their wild habitat. And their wild habitat is warming up and it's harder. There's more predators, there's less space. So where in the wild they'll live, I think the males live on average to like 18 years and the females to about 15 years. At the New England Aquarium, I had one patient who was 41. I
Wow.
had a patient who was 31. I talked about her when we were at Kripalu
Yeah.
because she was coming to the end of her life and simultaneously with caring for patients and obscure animals, I do some elder care in my life. I live with a 96-and-a-half-year-old relative who moved in with us a few years ago. My mother is aging and I think part of that weekend in that Inner Quest intensive with Aruni was just sort of I just needed to stop time of care and just sort of come back to who I am. But I was really processing that that bird was at her end and that lots of beings around me are at their end. And
Yeah. A-
yeah.
And it teaches us a lot,
Oh,
right? And kudos to you for taking the time to sit with it, to think about what it meant to you and a lot of the work that I wrote about that I went through was the things I learned from grieving and how we find purpose
yeah.
and not day one. I just was actually talking to a book club and I said that the grieving process is you can drop in and out of different stages of it, but there's stages in it. And
Mhm,
day one you were not thinking of purpose, but further into the journey you are thinking of purpose and what it means to you and
mhm.
I don't know if that relates to what you were thinking about or anything in that weekend. Some of the end of life type of experiences that you're around now.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking about end of life a lot, and I was drawn to doing end of life care about 10 years ago. A very dear friend of mine passed and he was a young guy and he was just kind of tired. He was an acupuncturist actually in incredible shape and he was tired and he was a triathlete. He said, "Oh, I'll just have some blood work done. Maybe I'm anemic." And he was anemic and oh, I better have that colonoscopy. And he had stage
Mm,
4 colon cancer, you know? And he
mm,
was so open with the process and the decision making he made around chemo or not chemo and how he wanted to be in his last months, which he doubled the time. They told him he had 6 months. I think he lived 13 months. And it was the
Mm.
most beautiful, open time. And it was a real gift to be someone who was in his inner circle, being able to ask any questions about it. What's it like to be dying? What's it like? What are you pissed about? What are you happy about? What are you letting go of? It's like, really,
Hmm.
will you haunt me? Like all the fun stuff.
We come back.
And yeah, exactly. And then after that, I was spurred. I'd always been a student of insight meditation, and I did some retreats with the New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care. And their mission is to bring wisdom and compassion to aging, illness, and death. And I realized that, I've had a 25-year-old acupuncture practice. I'll treat people, I don't even take new patients anymore. I just sort of see the same families. And you might have seen someone for a broken ankle or menopause at one point, but at some point they might come in and tell you about some horrible diagnosis, and some terminal situation. And I think before I really did this contemplative training, I was sitting there faking it, and the rest of my body was like, whoop, I'm out of the room. Like, what? I do not want to. And so then the question is, how do I be present with this? Like, how do I sit? I'm not going to fix the fact that you are in end stage breast cancer right now. And I think I said this to you once before, like, I don't want to fix people anymore. I want to be with them because there's such a power in bearing witness and such a power in just being with people and not trying to one of the things we learned in the training we did, it's an 11-month intensive. It's an incredible training if you're interested in it. It's through the lens of Soto Zen. But just when you're sitting with someone and they break down crying, just the act of handing them a tissue can say, I mean, it can be a very kind gesture, but it can also say, I'm not comfortable with your tears, so shut them down. It's like, I
Hmm.
didn't know that. I'm like, okay, how am I being on every level with people as they're grieving? And
Yeah,
yeah,
how not to force what your
yeah,
needs are on somebody. You have to wait to be
exactly.
asked. And it's hard. I mean, that's an
It's
incredibly
really
hard
hard.
thing. It's really hard not to make it about my feelings in that moment. It's
My
really
discomfort with
my
your,
discomfort with your
yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Like, but and again, we were talking earlier too about awareness. Like, at least we're aware of that,
yeah,
that that's a thing. And
yeah,
then and in that we can make better decisions about it.
yeah.
Are you thinking about going to work in that again or
No, I think the next phase for me, I've always been a fan of the James Harriet, All Creatures Great and Small. Do you
oh
remember
my
those
gosh, I
books? I
love
like
that. I love
read
those
those.
books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, wouldn't it be fun to really, accumulate all these stories of treating, all these animals.
Oh.
Even when I was in Uganda, I was in my little guest house and I heard this cow outside my window and I was like, that's not a cows don't lay down like that and make that noise. Like something's wrong. And I went out and she was in labor and no one was around. And I helped her. Actually, it was really profound because I was with a midwife who was a human midwife and she was part of our program. And I showed her these points on the upper shoulder of the cow. I said, we can sort of restart the contractions. And the cow gave birth, but she hadn't birthed the placenta yet. So we used these points just with the heel of our hand, and you could see the contractions ripple along this cow's belly. And then this human midwife, this really small woman, very young from Kampala, she reached right in and tractioned out the placenta, which is necessary. Otherwise, the cow would have an infection. And all those stories I think would be great to tell, but I don't
Yeah.
have time to tell them right now because I have a busy practice and I am doing all this elder care. And I guess what I was saying is I did all this studying with the New York Zen Center and retreats and their program. And I feel like I'm in the practicum now. I'm always want to take a different course or take this year-long thing in the precepts or something. And I'm like, I have to remind myself, oh no, you're in your clinical right now. You have a 96-year-old in the downstairs of your house who says every day, Claire, everything changes, which I think is how you get to 96, but who needs the coffee and are the sheets clean and let's visit and meaningful touch and let's go out to the diner. Like he needs the basic daily love. It's so simple and so gratifying. And then I have an elderly mom that I Anyway, you don't need the whole thing, but I'm in it, you know.
Yeah.
And
It's funny, Tara Brach, I don't know if you'll ever listen to her, but
mhm,
she talks a lot about when her mother was older and how busy she was. And you reminded me of her, like how she realized that she needed to slow down to spend
yeah,
time. And she was so glad that she did. And,
yeah.
again, I admire you for seeing that.
Well, and I
Um,
have an agreement. This is why I haven't taken new patients in the last year and a half. I have an agreement with all my current patients. Like I may drop things at the, I may suddenly be gone for 2 weeks because I need to have all of this set up so that I can just be there for the people who, and it's a privilege to run my own office and be able to do that. I get that, but they all get it. I think everybody would want that. They would, if it was their daughter, they would like, oh
it's,
yeah, go for it.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. And I think everybody understands. That's amazing. And
Yeah.
I hate to say it, I'm looking at time. What did we miss? What did you want to talk about that we didn't talk about? I mean, my God, giraffes to penguins, sea turtles. It's like a dream for me. This is going to be like good news, happy episode.
Happy turtles. Yeah, yeah. I think our bodies are nature, right? Our bodies are nature, and we're so accepting of our gardens. Like all the perennials have been
Mm,
under this soil and the snow this winter. And as gardeners, we totally have faith, oh, they'll be back. And I think our bodies are nature too, and our bodies are landscapes. And when we're having a tough time or a time where we need to go inward, like that's just like your peonies under the soil for the winter. Like I think we have to trust that we'll be back. And I think that's the beauty of this medicine and why it works on animals and people, because it comes from a tradition that sees the nature and the natural cycles.
I love that. I love that. Well, that seems like an excellent place to end. Thank you
Great.
so, so much.
Thanks
This
for
has been an
having me.
absolute joy. That's all for today. If you're interested in learning more about Claire, those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. If it was, please subscribe, drop a review, or share it with your friends and family. That's the best way to get it in the hands of those who may benefit. And if my daughters Sienna and Sylvia are listening, I just want you to know how proud I am of you. And I love you so, so much. Bye now.